This sitting is resumed.
Mr. Speaker, order number 3, in the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Law Revision and Law Reform Amendment Bill 2024.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for allowing me to occupy this chamber's time for the second time in one day sitting. This is not a matter that should attract a huge amount of my time or the chamber's time, but that does not in any way indicate or signal that what we're doing here in this amendment to the Law Revision and Law Reform Act should be relegated into insignificance. Mr. Speaker, the substantive legislation was laid in 2018 and passed in 2019. And even though it is Law Revision and Law Reform Act, the amendments today are principally only dealing with the law reform side of things. Mr. Speaker, the Law Reform Commission, and it would be useful for me to begin by reflecting on what they've been doing, has done a tremendous amount of work since their first appointments in 2019. And I would mention to this chamber that Mr. Justice Jefferson Cumberbatch, now of blessed memory and who is being interred later this week, was a member of that commission and served valiantly for as long as he was able. And this commission, sir, has embarked on a very ambitious program of work to reform the laws of Barbados in significant ways. Mr. Speaker, they have looked at multiple pieces of legislation, all of some import, including the legislation that we passed earlier today in this chamber. Many countries have established law reform commissions on an ad hoc basis. We have chosen to establish our Law Reform Commission as a permanent statutory body. One of our challenges, Mr. Speaker, has always been in small economies like ours and across the region, that it has been very difficult to keep pace with the changes in legal norms. We have a very small, relatively speaking, public service. We have small executives. It is extraordinarily difficult to keep pace with legal concepts that are constantly being changed and massaged and that are constantly evolving by additions of judicial decisions on the subject matter, by additions caused by legislative amendments. Statute and statute laws are always rapidly changing. So we've decided instead of having an ad hoc commission, we would have a permanent commission that would have the lawful authority, the legal authority, to keep all of our laws constantly under review and make recommendations for how they may be changed. No doubt there are a large number of statutory instruments that require changing. Our Property Act was first passed in 1979, our Family Law Act just before that. And we've had a whole raft of other pieces of legislation that are now dated and that need to be considered. It is better to have these statutes modified through the nonpartisan work of a Law Reform Commission than through the actions of an executive. The nonpartisan work of a Law Reform Commission is not tinged or tainted with any bias. You get the benefit of independent and impartial views of the law, where it should go, and you in essence remove the executive from a lot of the things a lot of the criticisms that can be made. Curiously enough, the bill that we passed in this chamber this morning, the cybercrime bill, was a bill that came through the Law Reform Commission in its entirety, but yet still we found ourselves being the subject of criticisms that we, the executive, are trying to stifle people's fundamental freedoms for our own motives and purposes. In strict thinking, in strict theory, the Law Reform Commission, having shepherded that piece of legislation from start to finish, really ought to have taken us out of that debate, but it's a small country, sir, and so be it. They've done a tremendous amount of work, and I feel it is important at the outset that I congratulate them and thank them for the enormous effort that they've put in helping us to grapple with some issues that needed attention. I am expecting very shortly to be looking at a new Legal Professions Act, which was presented to myself and to the bar in December of last year. Those are the kinds of things that are being dealt with by the Law Reform Commission. They've done yeoman's work. The challenge, though, Mr. Speaker, is in its structure. We established the Law Reform Commission as a department of government. Just like the probation department is a department in the Ministry of Home Affairs, just like the registration department is a department in the Office of the Attorney General, or the welfare department is a department in the Office of the Ministry of Elder Care and so on. It is, as it stands, a department of government, and it therefore means that in its operations, they operate as almost a tentacle from the ministry itself. So when they need to do things, they have to write a letter to the permanent secretary, who then transmits it through the normal governmental processes, and that can take a tremendous amount of time, especially when funding is involved, and then gets back to the commission and says, okay, you can do this. And the contracts for the commission, Mr. Speaker, if they need to engage somebody, have to be sent to the permanent secretary and then sent to the Solicitor General's chambers and on and on and on. And all of these things, Mr. Speaker, militate against the Law Reform Commission being able to work with dispatch and alacrity on the many matters that comes before it. In addition, sir, the Law Reform Commission has only a staff of 3. And because it has a staff of 3, it means that as an entity, it has to rely doubly on engaging services from consultants and so on an ad hoc basis. But moreover, it puts additional weight on the already busy members of the Law Reform Commission. So imagine, Mr. Speaker, a person who is a justice of appeal who has to deal with all of his matters, or some of the lawyers in private practice who are busy dealing with all their matters. They now have to come to the commission and take a lot of weight on their shoulders simply because of its structure, the commission is not able to engage people to supplement and to help to carry some of the workload. So, Mr. Speaker, that is why we are here. The nub of this amendment bill is that after it is passed, the Law Reform Commission would become a body corporate, or as we say, a Section 2021 body. And Section 21 refers to Section 21 of the Constitution, which essentially says that where by words or express, where by implication or express provision, entity is expressed to be a body corporate or to be subject to Section 21 of the Interpretation Act, then it will have full legal and corporate personality. So what we're saying is that with this legislation, we are looking to move the Law Reform Commission away from being a government department. The umbilicus for those of you who are Latin scholars, the umbilicus that connects the Law Reform Commission now to the ministry will essentially be cut and allow it to function as a body corporate in much the same way as CBC would function or National Housing Corporation or any of those other entities. So the reason this is important, Mr. Speaker, is to get rid of some of the delays that are attendant with this work. I have had situations, Mr. Speaker, where the chairman of the Law Reform Commission, amazing and fine legal intellect, has had to reach out to me to ask me to remove some of the log jams that are attendant with them engaging somebody to do a 2-week consultancy for a few $1,000s. But the processes that exist, that they're required to submit themselves to and to work under, as good as they are, prevent the Commission from working with dispatch. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have asked the Law Reform Commission to look seriously at the laws of Barbados, and they've sent their work program to us. We have never dictated to them what their work program should be. But such as they've sent to us has been very ambitious. They've dealt significantly with the copyright legislation of their own motion. That required a lot of work. It required engagement with consultants from overseas. The cybercrime legislation, again, similar things. But these things are slowed down and have been slowed down because of the way in which government works. And yes, we know that we could try to be more efficient, but as efficient as you want to be, there are better ways of achieving the mandate of the Commission. So, the first thing is to make it subject to Section 21 so that it can contract on its own. It will no longer have to come to the Minister of the Attorney General and write a letter to the Permanent Secretary just to hire somebody to do some legal research on some small matters, or big matters for that matter. Now, once we sever that umbilicus, we then have to put some kind of management structure in place and some kind of financial administration structures in place, because you now have to deal with the accounting, you now have to deal with the general management of the entity, and therefore this amendment bill also provides that the Law Reform Commission will have its own director. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, that some will say that it's a small body, but having its own director is less a function of the annual budget than it is a function of how to get the work of the Commission done in an orderly way and with all possible dispatch. It will not be the first entity in government to have a relatively small budget and its own director. The Community Legal Services Department, Community Legal Services, is a Section 21 body. It is a body corporate. It has a director and a deputy director. So it has serious management because it has important work to do. This commission will have a director because it has important work to do. And with the staff is small, yes, but it has to be able to build out itself in such a way as to effectively manage and shepherd the resources that government gives it, and try to make sure that the ambitious program is kept up. In addition, therefore, to the management side of things by providing a director, we've had to make provision for a whole set of financial obligations to be met, because as it stands now, the accounting processes of the Law Reform Commission are all done within the Office of the Attorney General. So the financial control of the Office of Attorney General is the one responsible for managing that budget. And the Permanent Secretary is the Chief Financial Officer, so he's the one who has overall responsibility for that budget. Under the regime that we're moving towards, that will cease to be. The director will have the general superintendents of the entity, and they will engage such people as are necessary to handle the financial reporting and accounting obligations that are so important. Those are, in essence, the amendments that we're coming to this chamber with. But intended, sir, intended to give the Law Reform Commission the independence that it needs, and of equal importance is the ability to move with alacrity and get the job that they've been asked to do done. Even though we have experienced jurists as commissioners, there will always be issues, there will always be legal constructs about which they will not have the experience. It's as simple as that. We would have to have a commission that is almost as big as the bar itself if we wanted to embrace or envelop all of the necessary areas of law. Imagine, sir, if we wanted the Law Reform Commission to do something on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. There's nobody with that skill set, so they have to be able to reach out. And when I say out, I don't just mean outside of itself. They are likely to have to reach outside of Barbados to get the necessary expertise so as to be able to advise on the work, inform their views, even draft the legislation. Now, Mr. Speaker, a lot of consultants who work internationally have relatively short windows to accept an assignment for any particular client, far less a small client like Barbados. We've had consultants who say, I can work for you, but I'm only available between September and October. But when you factor in all the government processes, and we finally get ready to sign the public contract, and it's the last week in October, the consultant says, well, sorry, I told you I can only work for you September and October, and you now send me a contract to sign at the end of October, but you're wasting my time. These are things that happen. So this commission will, by virtue of being a Section 21 body, will be able to do what it needs to do to buy in timely services, to contract in ways that the existing system does not allow. We have situations in government, Mr. Speaker, and this is not this administration situation. This is last administration, the one before that, going back as far as independence. Government contracts for services, and there are times when the contract is being signed after the service is long performed. Long performed. Because our systems don't operate us to act with alacrity. In order for us to empower the Law Reform Commission to meet the requirements of a modern and fast-moving Barbados, it is incumbent on us to give them that authority. But, Mr. Speaker, this legislation is the Law Revision and Law Reform Act. And I crave your indulgence by allowing me to mention a few matters that have arisen lately in the other place. It has come to my attention, Mr. Speaker, that individuals in the other place have jumped on some errors in legislation. And let me say at the outset that they are trifling errors. So don't let's get confused. Trifling, sir. And they are using the existence of these errors in statutes as an opportunity to whip this government and to whip the hard-working members of the Chief Parliamentary Council, as if to suggest that this administration is not worthy to be the government, that we are not worthy to be the people's representatives, that we are not worthy to be the ones determining the government's affairs, because instead of putting an S at the end of a word, you leave it as singular. Instead of saying maybe, the printer's devil ends up with two words, may and be. Instead of saying appeared before me, you end up with appear before me. And it is lawyers who are making these kinds of criticisms, sir. Mr. Speaker, I have always been a respectful person. I will not change that for anything. But I want to say here, Mr. Speaker, that people who come to public life must come to public life to make contributions of substance. And if they don't want to make contributions of substance, then they should look for a job as a primary school teacher, perhaps, and correct common entrance essays. Mr. Speaker, I have been a lawyer for over 30 years. You will have these kinds of errors in documents, from affidavits dealing with the identity to contracts worth $300 million. Simple as that. This Parliament has worked harder than any Parliament in the history of Barbados. We have passed more bills and more resolution than the last administration did in its full term. In fact, if you multiply the 2 terms they had then and the ones they had before that, sir. We have come to government to grapple with serious issues. I don't know. Well, it wouldn't be fair to say that I don't know. I do know the individuals that taught law to the members in the other place, because they taught me too. You know what I remember, Mr. Speaker? I remember the aphorism that law looks at the substance and not the form. That tells us, Mr. Speaker, that when a jurist has to consider a matter, he's not going to be concerned about if a word gets repeated twice, or if a word is out of place, because he will declare, as they have in many cases, that those words are considered surplusage. That's why you have words like this, surplusage. Things that don't belong there, but they do no harm to the bill. Mr. Speaker, it is a disgrace. It is a disgrace that somebody would seek to come to a chamber to berate the people in the lower house and effectively to berate the hard-working drafters in the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office. Mr. Speaker, I have not found a harder working bunch of public servants than those lawyers in the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office. They work night and day, and I know that they work night and day because I guess they might call me the slave driver. I accept it. They are a set of dedicated public servants who draft thousands and thousands of words every day trying to get the legislative intent right. And yes, there are times when we will miss a word. Certainly when we were in opposition, the last administration used to miss words too. But we came to public life to deal with substance, to deal with people's issues. And if your only criticism of a piece of legislation is because there's a misspelled word, let me say this. There is no parliament anywhere in the world, none, not one, that will get every single statute right and perfect all the time. Because statutes are not drafted by AI, they're drafted by human beings who work until midnight and 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning to try to get the business of the people done. And even AI, in fact, I rather them being done by our people than by AI, because AI does cite non-law and non-sources and make up things as they go along. Throughout the Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker, every parliament has passed a law allowing something called law revision. That's the other half of this bill. Law revision. And Mr. Speaker, the powers of the Law Revision Commissioner, they're vast. In fact, I'm not going to try to find it now. But the Law Revision Commissioner has been vested with powers to make laws make sense. No, you can't make sense out of nonsense. But in instances where words are not quite right, where there's spelling errors, where it may be necessary to interpose words, change around sections, all of these are powers that this Parliament in 2019 gave to its law revision commissioners, and we are replicating powers that they've had for many years. The law revision commissioners are given the power in law. In law, this is not something that we making up. They're given the power in law to make adjustments to deal with grammatical errors, misspellings, wrong words used, improper tense. They're given the power in law to do that. And this is replicated all across the Commonwealth because the world understands, even if one or two particular senators might not. The world understands that when it comes to drafting complex and simple legislation, from time to time there will be mistakes. How many times have we written something on our phones and end up with, you do it and you hit send, and then when you realize what you're saying, oh Lord, how could I have made that mistake? How could I have made that mistake? It happens to us every day. Every day. It happens to us, and a phone is just a little something. But when you are doing your emails, when you're writing your texts, these things happen, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure if you went back to some of your letters that your office has sent out, you say, oh Lord, it's a shame. They don't like that. Not that the people who are doing it aren't gifted enough, but the fact is, when you are under the kind of pressures that we are as a government, constantly having to deal with things, putting pressure on ourselves, putting pressure on our staff, trying to make sure that we meet the many deadlines that we have to meet, Mr. Speaker. There are times when you're not going to get everything checked. Simple as that. So it happens. It has happened it happened before we had computers. Probably happens more so even now. I therefore want to take this opportunity to do two things, sir. I want to thank my staff, the staff of the Chief Parliamentary Council, for responding to the needs of a government in circumstances where there's hardly a day that they do not have to go above and beyond. Mr. Speaker, only today, I had the privilege of dispatching to CARICOM a model law on the CARICOM arrest treaty warrant. Now, Mr. Speaker, there was a proposal that we should engage consultants from the EU to draft this bill for us. And I said, no, this is foolishness. We don't need people from the EU to come here to ask us what we think about this and how to do this, to go and draft a piece of legislation for us. They call it, in the international arena, I think they say that you hire a man from overseas to come and watch you ring a bell so that he could write down how to ring a bell. The point is, Mr. Speaker, I understood that we had skills here. I ran against somebody from the EU to do it. I said, Barbados will undertake this draft. So it's not just our own things that we're doing. We also have international and regional obligations that we are raising to the challenge to meet as well. Because that is the world in which we live in. We're not going to pay somebody from overseas to come in and ring our bell for us. We can do it ourselves. So, Mr. Speaker, my team works hard. They're diligent. They're committed. And you know what? Sometimes things happen. They've been out of the office of the Attorney General for about 2 months. They've had to work from home. And that means getting remote access from the computers. And that bill was done, I think we completed that while they were working away from the office. So these are the kinds of challenges that you face. But sir, without fail, they always rise to the occasion and do excellent work for us, so much so that I feel proud to be able to ask a Barbadian draftsman to draft something for the rest of the Caribbean because I know the skills that they have. Mr. Speaker, I can never guarantee any part of the Office of the Attorney General that this pressure is going to ease up. Based on the things that we have to deal with, it will not ease up. But I'm not going to condone, Mr. Speaker, senseless, pointless, foolish criticisms of the work that is being done purely because somebody wants to nitpick at niggling little things and not addressing the substance of the issues. The law says we look at the substance and not the form. There have been these kinds of errors in legislation going back from the time legislation first started. I suppose if we were classical scholars, we'd probably find some error in the original Greek of the Ten Commandments. I gotta stop doing this to the member for St. Peter. Well, there you go. So we're dealing with human beings, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not begging for a break for anybody. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that we have serious issues to deal with. And I'm asking that in this chamber or in the other chamber, when we see these things, it is in no way a reflection on dropping standards or anything of the sort. Those things don't come into the picture at all. There is no parliament anywhere in the world that does not have these things arising, and the law therefore deals with it, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to stop, Mr. Speaker. I want the members of this chamber to support this amendment to the Law Reform and Law Revision Act, Law Revision and Law Reform Act. I think that it will go a long way towards helping the Law Reform Commission do the things it needs to do for Barbados in the way in which it needs to do them. But it would have been wrong for me not to raise to the defense of the hard-working staff of the Chief Parliamentary Council office. They are the unsung heroes of this place. And in fact, as you would know, Mr. Speaker, in many other parliaments, the Chief Parliamentary Council are called thusly because they work for Parliament and out of Parliament. We have a different situation where they work with the Office of the Attorney General. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you for your patience and consideration.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Beg to move this bill be read a second time.
I beg to second that.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Mr. Speaker, it is never easy to talk behind the AG. Especially, sir, when he gets fired up. One would know, sir, that the Honourable Member for St. Joseph is one of the most stoic, calm, will not use two words, sir, when one would do. So when he gets to the point where he is as fired as he was, then I watched, sir, as I had all my notes were being ticked off, right? Starting with the word independent. However, that's actually where I'm going to start as well, sir. Sir, it's an exciting time for law and law revision in Barbados. We've embarked on a holistic approach to law reform in Barbados. Many of the laws, sir, in our statutes are outdated. Some have irrelevant provisions. Some, the language and form and what the law was crafted to address has moved on with the passage of time, sir, a new innovation, so that while the purpose of the law still exists, you need to go back through the law to make the changes to bring it in line with what exists. Sir, case in point is the Computer Misuse Act that was just repealed. When that act was done in 1993, sir, a lot of the things that were addressed in the new legislation were not contemplated. They couldn't be contemplated because the technology did not exist. And as we move along, while we may try our best to fit a square peg into a round hole, sometimes it is better to just amend the legislation to keep pace with what the current relevance actually is than try to harken back to legislation that has no practical use now. What are the duties of the Law Reform Commission, sir. I think that it is the duties are adequately captured, sir, and spell out what the possibilities are. And if we look at section 32(1), it says the Law Reform Commission shall systematically keep the law under review for the purpose of developing, modernizing, and simplifying the law. Quite often, sir, we read laws, we deal with laws, they are bread and butter. We learn to read them. But laws that were drafted this year or last year or in the last 5 years bear no real resemblance to laws that were drafted 30 or 40 years ago, some of which are still on our books. The language is different. The structure is different. The ability to read and actually understand what is being said in the law is different. How we phrase things, sir, is different. The Law Reform Commission is tasked now with effectively trying to bring all of our laws in line and make them relevant to now. To do that, because of the pace of legislation that is coming down the pipes now, sir, with all of the different treaties that we are signatories to, with all of the different organizations that we're in, with all of what is going on in the world, the associations that we keep, with what is going on in Barbados, new legislation is coming down at a furious pace. As the AG said, the Honourable AG said, sir, we have never seen this much legislation coming down in this short a space of time. I remember the Honourable reformer member, sir, Mr. Toppin, Ronald Toppin, in the business sector, dropped, I can't remember how much it was, but it was a record number of pieces of legislation in a week. A record number. It made you dizzy with what happened there. But that simply, sir, was a trend of what was to come, and it has not eased up since. So just in creating new legislation, the CPC's office is swamped. It can hardly keep track or keep up the pace of meeting our new legislative commitments. It definitely does not have time to go back through and modernize old legislation, remove things that were there. If I use a case in point, sir, this is not the position of the government, this is my position. If I use a case in point, we have in our Customs Act that the disruptive pattern camouflage, right? That it is illegal to possess and to wear the disruptive pattern camouflage. If ever there was a piece of legislation that needed changing, it was that. Why? Because, sir, I was present on a beach when I saw a young lady in a pink and gray camouflage bikini. Pink and gray camouflage bikini. And, sir, a police officer went up to the lady, advised her that what she was wearing was illegal, verified that she was staying at Aqua Hotel, which was right behind her, and told her she needed to go and change her bikini. Otherwise, she could be arrested and charged. Now, sir, I could understand that at the time that legislation was passed, and I believe that was the time, around the time, sir, of the Grenada situation, where there were a lot of armed forces in Barbados, all at the same time. So all through Barbados, you had different types of camouflage going on, the British, the whoever. So you didn't want any confusion with the armed forces. That's the substance. As the AG said, that's the substance of the legislation. That was the intent. You didn't want anybody impersonating a member of the armed forces. So that cannot possibly extend to the fashion that camouflage is now. That cannot possibly extend, sir, to a camouflage party dress. It definitely cannot extend to camouflage Speedo. So my point is, these are things, sir, that actually, to me, need to be relooked. If we want the spirit of that legislation to still continue, then change it, make it an offense to impersonate a member of the armed forces or to dress in such a way as to cause confusion as to whether. But we think of camouflage as brown and green and whatever colors it is, dark green, light green, you know what I'm coming. When I say camouflage, everybody has a picture of what camouflage is. Sir, it does not constitute orange and red. It does not constitute pink and gray. But the CPC's office has no time for that with what they have going on. But, sir, these are things that can actually probably be dealt with the Law Reform Commission. Now, why I'm going fully into this is because the second section, sir, says, the Law Reform Commission shall have the following powers: to receive and consider any suggestions or formal proposals for the reform of the law which may be made to the Commission. Here is where all of the people that keep saying, why you still have that on the books? Why does the government not change this? You now have an avenue. You now have a part to play. If there is a law that affects you that you think has no more relevance and we accept it's just there because it's there. It's just there because we haven't had a chance to change it. The citizenry of Barbados can now get involved in the process. If there is something that offends you, right into the Commission. They have the authority to deal with it. They now, sir, are a body corporate, as the AG would have indicated. It is real difficult as a department. We just came through the estimates process, sir. Spending money in government is difficult. It is. Getting approval for things might be difficult. Sometimes the agenda that you have in a department does not necessarily coincide with the budget allocated to that department at the beginning of the year. So it puts necessary restrictions. The new independence of this commission, sir, allows it to actually run its own business. It can prioritize what needs to be done, and it can allocate the resources or bring in the assistance. And sometimes, sir, it's as simple in a short amendment. Something that is a nuisance to 20 people, but has no practical import for anybody else that needs to be changed. You can do a short contract to deal with that. They don't even have to trouble it themselves. For the major and big things, and a lot of the treaty obligations that we have are new to Barbados. A lot of the things that we're in now are new to Barbados. They weren't contemplated by us. We don't have the expertise in them. But because of how the world is going and to tick off boxes, sometimes you actually have to toe the line in respect of legislative agendas. Where the skill set doesn't exist in Barbados. Let's use AI. At some point in time, we're going to have laws that deal with AI and regulate what can be done, what latitude you have in using images, those sort of things. One of the American pop stars, sir, just sued. Somebody used her features generated by AI and put it in porn. Right? They state clearly it's not her. They say that this is the AI generated image. But that does not stop the people from calling her or people sharing it and people seeing it and distress to her children. So she sued. We don't have legislation to do anything like that. When we get to that point, which we will have to, AI is here to stay. It is new to Barbados. It is in common usage in other parts of the world. It is as of now unregulated. We cannot use the existing legislative structure to govern what is effectively a new construct that is taken off. We are going to have to regulate the use of AI. When it comes time to draft that legislation, we can't draft it. I can tell you right now, I doubt that we have the skill set to deal with that here. You are going to have to bring in expert assistants and consultants for that. This allows the Law Reform Commission to contract as it sees fit to get the best piece of legislation to fit the circumstances that it requires. The AG also raised, and I think it bears repeating, that because the current Law Reform Commission is under the umbrella of the Attorney General's office, everybody assumes that the agenda is political. Everybody assumes that the generation of all of the legislation coming out of Barbados is coming from the government to serve the government and the government's interests alone, which is far from the truth. Which is very, very far from the truth. I have been a party, sir, to meetings with the Law Reform Commission, where different views contended and we sought to get the best piece of legislation. I can verify what the AG said. I have sat down in meetings that effectively went on for days with members of the CPC, of the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, going through legislation line by line, paragraph by paragraph. So I've sat down with the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South when we were going through the drafting of the child justice and the child protection legislation, literally with about 20 different stakeholders, all views contending, as we went through line by line. If somebody had a difficulty with a word, then we sought to get consensus on what the suitable word was, so that when those pieces of legislation actually came before Parliament, although they went to select committee, they came with the widest possible consultation. I do not think, sir, there was ever any wider consultation for any two pieces of legislation in history of Barbados. I cannot imagine it. It was a tedious process. But we brought that here, having consulted with the UN, the child advocates, the child care board, the welfare department, probation, everybody, the churches, civil society, everybody was consulted. But when the two pieces of legislation landed here, you hear the government trying to abuse children, the government trying to lock up children, the government trying to do this and to do that. Because, sir, there is a political interest to be served. We are trying to do what is best for the country, but, sir, we do it from the comfort of in here. We do it from in here where we have a voice. There are those voices out there, sir, that are now trying to be heard. And to be heard, they think it incumbent upon them to criticize every single thing, every piece of legislation, the most innocuous pieces of legislation are being criticized and pilloried as being part of the government's agenda, simply because it came from the government. Sir, the Commissioner of Probate's amendment, the Commissioner of Probate's legislation that is the subject of recent hot debate, if ever there was an innocuous piece of legislation, that is it. I mean, sir, that amendment was done because it was woefully out of date, and it was simply to bring it in line with what exists now, what makes sense. Harmless. Nothing in it. Harmless. But because the voices could not find anything to complain about in the substance of that legislation, they started to pick on letters. They started to pick on commas. They started to nitpick literally, sir, as a spell check. Nothing at all to do with the substance of the legislation. I listened, sir, to the debate in the other place. I could not believe that that amount of time was spent trying to tear down that bill, that piece of legislation. It is all because, sir, their interest to serve. Everybody has an interest. Sir, BD, independent, everybody has an interest. And it is best for us, sir, in the service of Barbados and us trying to do right by the people, that we actually, you know what, is no time. Is no time to amend the legislation that governs the Law Reform Commission. It is no time, sir, to actually put it on its own independent path. We have no interest to serve in this besides the interests of Barbados. It's not about this government trying to put things in place to keep itself in power. We're trying to move Barbados along. We're trying to keep up with the pace with the rest of the world. So we're trying to be best in class. That requires us to be innovative. That requires us to be cutting edge. That requires us to be nimble. That requires us to be able to do very quickly the things that need to be done very, very quickly without worrying about backlash. And if, sir, it requires the Law Reform Commission to be a body corporate, standing on its own 2 feet, independently responsible for things that it suggests, then so be it. So be it. It may not change those who insist on criticizing everything. But we can happily say, sir, when legislation comes here, this one came from the Law Reform Commission, and this is what informed it. And let people say what they will. But the point is, sir, it allows for, I guess, a greater level of transparency. It allows us to appreciate the extent, and people to appreciate the extent of what it is that we have to do as a government. I as well, sir, wish to commend the office of the CPC. I alluded to the 2 pieces of legislation that, along with the Honourable Member from St. Michael's South, we were hands-on involved in drafting. But there are other pieces of legislation, sir, that concern my office because of my legal background. So I actually like to get involved in the drafting. I like to actually get down to the words and the letters and the commas. I get a perverse pleasure, I guess, sir, from doing it. But I can tell you, sir, that I am able to reach out to the office of the CPC or members from that office, sir, at any time of the day, to bounce things off of them, to say I'm reading this, I have an issue with this, to say, you know what, I know we have submitted legislation, but I just had a thought. Can you please factor this as well? And the reception has always been one of, yes, we will try to do it. And invariably, sir, if even I make a comment or make a suggestion, it comes back the next day or within a week with the suggestion captured. Does this wording capture what you're trying to do? Right? They are responsive, although being overwhelmed. They are enthusiastic about what they do, sir, although being overwhelmed. And it is not easy. I don't think they have ever seen this amount of work. I know they are stretched out. I know even during when they had to shut down the building next to us, which houses the CPC, and they were working remotely, and I can call her name, sir, because it's not in a negative sense, Ms. Sean Rainbell, right, was pushing some stuff for me, and I know they were having challenges in trying to manage the files. Were at the office, they're trying to do it off the computer, but that did not daunt. They did not try to slow down the agenda of the legislative agenda of the government and went over and beyond the call. We often criticize, sir, when things are going wrong. We often criticize when departments are not working. We often criticize when people are not doing the jobs they're supposed to do. When we do that, sir, I said equally, you have to give credit where credit is due. So I wish to echo these sentiments and completely compliment, sir, the staff in the AG's office, and in particular, sir, the staff responsible for the drafting of the legislation. They're doing a stellar job. They're producing at a pace. I don't know how they do it, but long may they continue. And may they now continue properly with the help of the Law Reform Commission. One last thing, sir, as I close. The other thing that the Law Reform Commission is able to do, sir, is advise on policy. If they see emerging trends, it's a legally based institution. If they see emerging trends, sir, they can look at our laws and make suggestions that we may wish to consider this or consider that. They can look at model legislations in other parts of the world and adapt it and make the suggestions to the CPC. So it allows another body to hire in as much assistance as it needs to not only update, but keep pace with the emerging trends. I point lastly again to me, the two most important aspects, sir. Section 32.1, that they shall systematically keep the law under review for the purpose of developing, modernizing, and simplifying the law. And, sir, that they shall have the following powers: to receive and consider any suggestions or formal proposals. It does not say from the AG, it does not say from the government. It is open-ended. It says to receive and consider any suggestions or formal proposals for the reform of the law which may be made to the Commission. So I'm inviting, sir, all Barbadians, if there are aspects of the law that you believe are unfair to you, if there are aspects of the law you believe that make no sense, if the aspects of the law you think are outdated, outmoded, and in need of modernizing, feel free to write in and make your suggestions to the Law Reform Commission. I will liaise with the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, sir, the Honourable AG, and we will publicize through GIS how persons can make their suggestions to the Law Reform Commission, so that the citizens of Barbados have an input into what it is. You will see it is a transparent and independent process. With those words, sir, I know which one I'm going to write it on. You can probably guess which one I'm going to write it on as well, sir. But I look forward to this next step in the legal processes in Barbados, and this next step, sir, in enhancing our own legislation and jurisprudence. And I look forward to the active participation of Barbadians in the process. I thank you, sir, and I support the bill.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity now for the second time for the day to rise in these chambers and join debate, and to, on this occasion, give support to the Law Revision and Law Reform Amendment Bill, which is presently before the House. And I rise on just a few issues, sir, to support wholeheartedly the policy move to make this commission, which since its establishment in 2019 has been doing tremendous work, but to give it now separate corporate identity, distinct and independent from a departmental entity under the Ministry of the Attorney General, and with the bureaucracy that such a being would have, and still, of course, now, until this bill is proclaimed, entails. I know, of course, having been a minister, the bureaucracy which can entail in terms of a ministry and getting systems approved, getting contracts done. The Honourable Attorney General gave the instance, by the time you finish, an individual is finished the work, he hasn't got a contract yet. In a lot of cases, he or she. The issue of the payments, going through the whole process, and ultimately ending up, of course, with the permanent secretary, who is the chief financial officer of the ministry, and a lot of time wasted when in a lot of cases there's urgency involved. So this now separation and legal distinction as a corporate entity, which this bill seeks the Parliament's approval for, is extremely necessary, sir. The Law Reform Commission, as I said, has been doing tremendous work, which, of course, headed by Sir David Simmons, sir, who, as I said earlier today, of course, an outstanding member, former member of this Parliament and head of the judiciary in this country. And again, as the Honourable Attorney General said, served as well by now late Honourable Justice of Appeal, Mr. Jeff Cumberbatch, as I said earlier. who I had close association with in at least 3 cases, one as a student, one as member of the First Consumer Claims Tribunal, and one we used to play a lot of tennis together at Paragon Tennis Club in previous years. And this commission has been doing tremendous work. It was responsible, or it is responsible for the draft Rights of Persons of Disabilities Bill, which I know the Honourable member for St. Michael South has vowed would be brought before this Parliament, before the end of this calendar year. When Sir David heard that the Cabinet had appointed a committee, National Advisory Committee, to establish a commission on rights of persons with disabilities and to improve their lives, and that I was named as chairman, he immediately called me up. He called the Honourable Minister for People Empowerment, member for St. Michael's Central, and offered the services of the Law Reform Commission to pay for a consultant to draft this extremely vital legislation, which constitutes a vacuum in our law. We now have the policy approved by Cabinet, and we look forward to the law coming into place. And in addition to paying for the consultant, one of the best legal brains in this part of the world, sir, the Commission, we had an all-day session at Lloyd Erskine, Sandyford. I think it was in November 2022, with stakeholders there, the CPC, two of their officers were there, ministry officials, to go through the bill step by step and to obviously put it in a better place that it can again go to the ministry after we had, of course, had meetings with any and everybody you could think of, sir, in this country short of the devil on the bill. So, I mean, the community for people with disabilities is absolutely indebted to the Law Reform Commission on this issue alone. And I know that the Commission has reached out even further on these and similar matters, because the Mental Health Act, Chapter 45, is in need of reform, and of course that relates to people with mental disabilities, sir, and believe that they have, on principle, agreed to do work on that whenever the Ministry of People's Empowerment is ready. I know they've also reached out to the Honourable Minister, and to be, even though, of course, there's no longer a committee on issues of having on our statute books an enduring power of attorney legislative framework, which England has, the UK has, for instance. And therefore, it is a situation where these very experienced legal practitioners, all of them extremely experienced, sir, many, many years practicing the law, not only practicing, serving in judicial capacity, some of them have been able to discern what is in need of reform in terms of our legislative framework, and are willing to assist in this regard. But of course, that takes resources. And in this situation, we heard the Honourable Attorney General say that the present staff of the Commission is only 3 right now. So what we're doing today will give wider scope for them to employ more staff, both on a long-term and short-term basis, as the case may be, to employ experts, technical and otherwwise experts on their own without having to go through the bureaucracy of the ministry, the Office of the Attorney General. And this makes for better production, to give them that independence and of course, this Parliament has the confidence in those who serve that they will spend those resources which are voted by this Parliament, no doubt in the estimates coming up, to good use. I agree totally, sir, with the sentiments of the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs at the end of his contribution just now, that section 32 of this bill is the most important part of this bill, spelling out the functions of the Commission. The Honourable Member spoke about a few of the functions, so I won't go over that. He spoke about one or two, but what readily addresses my mind is the last name function to obtain such information as to the laws and legal systems of other countries as appears to the Commission likely to facilitate the performance of any of its functions. In other words, this clause is giving the Commission the authority to look at comparative law in our, clearly within our CARICOM, our sister CARICOM countries, but in the wider Commonwealth countries as well, surely, and see what we can utilize to now bring better legal legislative framework in our country. And I mean, we have our Family Law Act, over 40 years ago, based to a large extent on the Australian Family Law Act, our Company Law Act, again, over 40 years vintage, the Substantive Act, based on the Canadian Companies Act. So we don't live in a vacuum or in a cocoon or by ourselves on this 166 square mile rock. And therefore, this function of the Law Reform Commission is of extreme necessity, and to give them the resources, obviously, to do the research into other legal systems and other countries' laws, which we can utilize as precedents and guides for our laws. A provision that excites me as well too, sir, is that by, I think, the 31st of November of any calendar year, the Law Reform Commission has to submit, Section 34D, prepare a program for law reform of that year and submit it to the Attorney General no later than the 31st of January of that year. And that's very important. The next section mandates the Attorney General to submit a report of the proceedings to Parliament, in fact, with any comments that he thinks fit. This is important, again, to have parliamentary oversight on this issue. And obviously, Parliament can have an input into this. My only concern would be that it doesn't give a time frame by which the Attorney General should submit that program to Parliament. I'm sure an efficient Attorney General such as is present would submit it in good time. I think under most laws, I believe it is within 3 months of the end of the financial year or the beginning of the calendar year. As I said, efficient Attorney Generals such as who we have now will do that, sir. My concern, though, in not putting a time frame is where you get a lazy Attorney General, as we have regrettably had in previous administrations other than this party, sir, and who because there's no time frame fixed, say, I ain't bothering lay any program before any Parliament. So that is my only concern there, sir, because you always have to take into account, in my opinion, ministerial officials who are not as efficient as those who occupy the positions at present. But this bill provides the opportunity for associations like the Bar Association, for instance, to be making input now into law reform under, as I said, Section 32, where, persons and bodies, organizations, I suppose even obviously members of parliament are invited to submit proposals on law reform to the commission. And this augurs well for greater input and transparency and involvement of the public in the affairs of law reform. I mean, we really and truly, what we did in 2019 was novel, sir. Should have been done a long time ago, where you had a standing law reform and law revision commission, because we all know, all of us who have practiced law, those who don't, Bajans who are knowledgeable, would know that we have a lot of laws on our statute books which are outdated now, some 100 years old, some 70, long past their expiry date, and a situation where we have to give the resources and the capacity to any such commission to propose reforms of these laws and to work with Parliament to have those laws reformed. If that's much shorter than I would normally talk, sir, I'm obliged to you. I just again wish to commend the Law Reform Commission and the commissioners and the limited staff of 3 for the work they have done so far in these 5 years, and to look forward to their continued tremendous work, and to be glad to be part of this Parliament to give support to that cause. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable member for St. Michael's South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. Like the honourable member who went before me, I also intend to be brief. And I want to begin by thanking the Attorney General for this work, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would not feel comfortable if I were to not say a few words, having had the opportunity to work so closely with the Law Reform Commission on the disability legislation that the honourable member just spoke of, and also together on the elderly legislation. And I also feel, sir, that there is a sense where people hear these phrases, Law Reform Commission, and start to assume that it is some esoteric thing out there that has no bearing on their lives, that somehow it is the exclusive preserve of erudite and learned men, and that it has no bearing to the rest of us who live in this place called Barbados. But I feel it is necessary to say that that is as far from true as being far from true could be. I must tell you, sir, that first of all, as the AG has brought this paper here to help, in a way, restructure some of the functionings of the Commission in relation to what has become the customary practice now of this government, which is to engage in restructuring. All of us in our various ministries, sir, are going through a process of what works and what does not work. How do we make this work better? All of us. I've had to do it with the social services. I know every minister in here could tell you what they're working on to be able to restructure effectively so as to enable departments to function a lot better. And so if we are here to ensure that the Law Reform Commission is a body corporate that is now allowed to do more and faster, then I believe we are all duty-bound to be able to support that. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I wanted to just say thanks really to the Law Reform Commission because of the work they've done on the elderly legislation thus far and the work that they would have done on the disability bill. And when we began that process, the honourable member for St. James North did not say, but when we began that process, we knew we had to come up with legislation. We did not know at the time that we would have the benefit of all of the input of the Law Reform Commission. And at the end of that process, what we received was a body of work that I believe is beyond question. And you will see it, sir, when we present it to the House. We've thus far taken the draft bill as well as the assistance for the draft and instructions and taking those to CPC, sir. I should also tell you that I found the process somewhat refreshing, and that there were a number of meetings that we held with the Law Reform Commission, and that the level of engagement and involvement in these social issues would make you think it was really a gathering meant to analyze social policy and social programming. Beyond the understanding of the law, it was a question of why is this important? What works, what does not work? What mischief are we trying to correct? What opportunity are we trying to create for people? What needs are we trying to meet? Those things. So it became a real body that was alive, doing work on and on behalf of people, sir. And so we were able to develop what I think is a very precise document at the end of the day. I look forward to when we are debating that, sir. I must also thank the chairman in particular of that commission for his passion. And the passion, sir, that persons who, the passion is known of the Honourable Member for St. James North when it comes to persons with disabilities, but the passion shared and shown by the chairman of that commission was extremely refreshing and humbling. And it is no stranger to any of us that all Barbadians think that the chair of the committee is a distinguished Barbadian. We expect, sir, from him a level of behavior that we associate with only the top of behavior, sir, in terms of class and so on. But the involvement in the details on the policy, where we wanted to take Barbados, sir. Early morning phone calls, sir, from the chair, late night phone calls, sir, from the chair, to be able to do this work. And I commend the Law Reform Commission, sir, for that work. I found the entire process to be one where it was consultative, where there were contending opinions in the room. A big room, sir. We had meetings where we brought everybody. CPC's office sat there so that when the bill actually came back to CPC, with the hope that they would have seen the work that had gone into it. First of all, I must commend the entire Law Reform Commission and the government, sir, for setting it up, because this has been a real, for us in the Ministry of People Empowerment, this has been a real gem. And it has allowed us to produce what I think will be the best piece of legislation to empower persons with disabilities in this country, in the Caribbean, sir. I also feel the same in relation to the process for the elderly. You might recall, sir, that there was a point where myself and a group of attorneys who are now very dear friends of mine, I must confess, were publicly engaged in a conversation around what the law should be and so on. And the chair of that committee and I also had a conversation. And again, the offer was made for us to be able to use that avenue, that facility, to be able to develop proper legislation, sir. And so together with the same firm and the Law Reform Commission and the CPC's office and our internal persons, sir, we are working on developing what I think, thanks to the Law Reform Commission, will be a fantastic piece of legislation. The other thing, sir, as said by the Attorney General, sir, I wouldn't know how to sit again without thanking the CPC. I honestly would not. Because my ministry alone, well, both of them, when I was in maritime and blue economy, I almost forgot for a second. When I was Minister of Maritime and Blue Economy, sir, the amount of legislation that we sent as one ministry alone to CPC, at some point this chamber is going to be flooded with maritime legislation. And it's going to make Barbados the most transformed area when it comes to maritime. But in my ministry, we've also been working on a number of pieces of legislation, all going to CPC. And again, like I must thank the chair of the Law Reform Commission, I have to thank the CPC too. Because again, I get telephone calls for clarification. A couple of days ago, I was driving in my car and I picked up the phone and I called CPC. We had a lengthy conversation from St. James, where I live, to, I was on my way to Cabinet, sir. And we had a conversation around the structuring of the new amalgamated entity. And I was making some last-minute changes. And I also feel, in all fairness to the CPC, that because we are so involved in our work, this is not a static thing. You know, this is not a case where sit down and you devise a policy or you work on legislation and that's it. You let it go. You never look back at that's not how we work. So there are moments where I pick up the phone and I say, I'm sorry, but I need you to make these changes. This is what the new evidence is saying. This is the direction I feel that we need to go. And oftentimes under pressure, I've watched the CPC respond. And that's just my ministry. Sir, I bet it's happening in the Honourable Member for St. Peter, for St. John, all the way down the line, sir, to my right. I'm pretty sure that in every single ministry, in fact, the Honourable Member for St. Peter was just telling me about a conversation he too had with the CPC. And I know that all of us, sir, are doing it, sir. And I want to thank the CPC because of the amount of work. The response time has been fantastic. It has been an amazing opportunity to work on a lot of these pieces of legislation. So when I think about some of the criticisms, I believe that we are now getting into the habit of majoring in minors. And that when you have bills of such substance, as is the case with most of the bills that we bring to this house, when you have bills that are of such substance, and we spend time debating minors as opposed to the substance of the legislation, sir, we can detract from the work that we have to do. And the truth is, it is that kind of thing that would make ordinary Barbadians think that we are not serious people. You bring a serious bill to have a serious conversation and you end up in a whole conversation, sir, about things that you wouldn't expect would be frontal in people's minds, or that an attorney general would have to come and clarify certain things. Sir, I was a lecturer at the university for a number of years. I was also an auditor for a number of years. In accounts, there are things, and the Honourable Member for St. Peter would know, there are things called follow-through errors. You make an error in an accounting document, sir, as a student or as a teacher. You don't get to keep, and you, sir, would know, you taught accounts. You wouldn't keep taking off marks every time. It's a follow-through error. You accept that the error is made, and so on. When, sir, you are correcting a paper from one of your students, sir, any lecturer worth the opportunity to be lecturing would know that you are looking for the person's capacity to think, the person's capacity to be able to pull together different ideas. Exactly. You are looking for people's capacity to think, to pull together ideas. The whole point is not to be punitive. You want to make sure that this student, sir, has a grasp of the issues. It's not an English language course for the most part, although you want the English, of course, to be as precise as possible. But that is what you do. Sir, we know this in primary school. We know this in secondary school. We know this in university, sir. We know it in the house, but apparently some don't know it in the other place. That at the end of the day, sir, what matters is the substance. Now, I'm not saying that we should gloss over errors. Errors happen. But let us have a debate so that Barbadians realize that these are serious conversations for a serious time, sir. Some of these things are so jejune. The whole conversation, the entire argument sometimes so basic. I was saying to the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central that it seems to me that persons have determined that they should go after the most base of a person's fear, the most base of a person's character, sir. To think of the lowest low and to go there in order to move a crowd forward. So most of them, sir, speaking to the gallery, as if the gallery, sir, is a bunch of unthinking people. Barbadians are not foolish, sir. They're not unthinking people. And they are well aware that there is a serious government trying to do serious things on their behalf, sir. And at the end of the day, sir, that is why we came here. Sir, there are days sometimes that we are so exhausted. You cannot produce the amount of legislation that this government has produced, sir, and not be tired on some days. There's some days that you're tired, and that's the truth. But I know, sir, they recognize that we come here to be able to do serious work. And so these things, sir, affect people's lives. When we talk about the work that the Law Reform Commission has to do, that's affecting people's lives, sir. The cybercrime bill that we discussed earlier, sir, affecting people's lives. And yet we would want to carry it to the lowest of the lows, sir, to play to the gallery, but not recognizing that it's not even a gallery at all, because they're not just sitting there watching. These people are actively involved in these decision-making processes and affairs that affect their lives. And that is why, sir, I feel that we have to come to this place and engage in serious work, sir, all of us. And I mean, I'm not an advisor for any political party, but it is consistently disappointing that we cannot engage in some of these serious issues, sir. I believe, sir, that we came in and we found legislative architecture, sir, that for the most part is as old as the building in some cases. I was dealing with child protection legislation, sir, from 100 years ago. It is the offense of wondering that the minister, the honourable member for Christchurch East had to address. I mean, they're just things. And we want to come, sir, to make lives better for people, but to be spending our time, sir, responding to things that the bills do not even present, sir. To have to spend time talking about things that aren't in the bills because they are in the imaginations of other people's minds and given to Barbadians to make Barbadians feel fearful. And that's the reality of it, sir. I want to close, sir, by thanking the Law Reform Commission. This is serious work, sir. This is serious work. I want to thank them, sir, because I know without the Law Reform Commission, I would not have had the opportunity, as did the Honourable Member for St. James North, who chaired the committee, to have such a good piece of legislation done so quickly, sir, and done so effectively, and in a way that is modern and captures all of the issues, sir, that the persons in the disabled community can say, yes, that is a government that went to work on my behalf. I want to thank them, sir, for the work that they're doing as well for the ministry on behalf of the elderly, so that they too can say when this bill comes to Parliament, that that is a serious government who has gone to work to do things on their behalf, sir. I commend the AG for bringing the necessary changes to be able to make it more fit for purpose, to allow us, sir, to be able to do the work, sir, that is necessary, sir. A lot of the things in the public service, and I say so, sir, as a person who is eternally grateful to the public service. Having spent most of my life as a public servant, I am eternally grateful to the public service. But there are a number of things, sir, that we have to change. We have to change. The idea that we can continue to do things as we did them because we were doing things this way forever has to change. It is not good enough to say when I was young, I had to wait at the QEH2, I had to wait for 10 years to get these things, sir. That is why we are so busy trying to change things. And that is why, sir, I believe our legislative agenda is as compact as it is, sir. I even reflect sometimes, and I say as a student, now thinking of myself, sir, as a student of policy, I say to myself, perhaps sometimes we are doing so many things Barbadians may not be able to appreciate all the things that we are doing at the same time. And I ask myself, what would be the one or two things that I would say we shouldn't be doing now? And I cannot think of any, because all of these matters are so urgent. The exigencies of the day, sir, have thrust upon us, sir, the responsibility to be the government that has to modernize Barbados. That's the reality, sir. I hope that Barbadians appreciate what it is that we are doing and why it is that we are doing these things. I trust that the Barbadians that I know are able to filter out the noise when they need to filter out the noise. I know the Barbadians that I know do not like to be treated as if they're unthinking for those who decide that they want to play to the gallery, sir. So because the Law Reform Commission has been outstanding, sir, because the CPC has been outstanding, sir, I support what is before this House, sir, in as full and as strong a capacity as ever I could. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, clauses 1 to 7. 7, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 through 7 stand parked.
The question is that clauses 1 through 7 stand parked. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Beg to move, Mr. Chairman, that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule will be the schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Chairman, I apologize. I beg to move that you do not report this on the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reportedly passed on one bill in committee.
Beg to move this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move this bill do now pass and be cited the Law Revision and Law Reform Amendment Act 2024.
Beg a second that.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, order number 4, in the name of the Senior Minister, Honourable Senior Minister, Minister of Transport and Works, and Leader of Government Business, to move the second reading of the Transport Authority Amendment Bill 2024.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise, Mr. Speaker, to introduce a very minor amendment, but a necessary amendment in relation to the Transport Authority Act, which we would have passed sometime last year. When I came to the chamber on that occasion, Mr. Speaker, it was against a background that still exists very much so today, where there was a need to strengthen and to expand the powers of the Transport Authority. And obviously we wanted to make sure that they could not only issue permits for the purpose of the PSVs, but also to review its decisions in relation to the issuance of those permits or the suspension or the revocation of those permits. That we also wanted them to be in a position where there was clarity as to the refusal of permits as well, or the suspension, as it relates to any public service vehicle, whether it be a motor omnibus, a minibus, or even a road taxi. I would also have provided, Mr. Speaker, a snapshot at the time of what I was very pleased to introduce to the chamber and certainly to the public, which was that after some 15 years of about 20 different iterations of Transport Authority regulations, we were finally in a position to have had the approval of Cabinet, which would have given the Transport Authority the ability to now properly regulate the entity and to really give teeth to what its mandate has been since 2008. I don't know why, as I said then, the position was that neither administration, in terms of its various drafts, found it fit to bring the changes, but we were pretty much at that point where, after going through all of the drafts, we were at that point where we now had something of substance that all parties had pretty much agreed to. What we realized, however, though, Mr. Speaker, that was that after we'd introduced the legislation and the initial amendment to the Transport Authority Act, the issue that arose was that the owner's responsibilities, which apparently had been included in several of the different iterations, had somehow been omitted from the final draft that we had approved in terms of those regulations. And as a consequence, we obviously could not come to the public with the regulations that were incomplete, because a large part of the reason why we had also wanted to bring a fulsome set of regulations was to cover not only the responsibilities of drivers and conductors, but also the general public, and in particular, the owners of public service vehicles as well. And it was while the Chief Parliamentary Counsel and the officers in that department were reviewing the regulations that they also took a further look at the Transport Authority Act. They recognized that there were some changes, additional changes that needed to be made to the legislation. More so, Mr. Speaker, to bring clarity or to avoid any misinterpretation of any particular section. They felt at the time, and which is the substance of the introduction of today's amendment, that the Act should be amended to provide a definition of license, to ensure that the use of the word license in the relevant section is not mistaken for the license which is issued by the Barbados Licensing Authority. Put simply, the current section of the legislation simply referred to the Transport Authority being able to revoke, suspend licenses that it had issued. But I think the public is well aware that the Licensing Authority also has powers to issue the licenses specific for PSV vehicles. And we did not want a situation where the terminology of license in any way made people feel that the Transport Authority could take away their driver's license. So we wanted to make the amendment to Section 23(1) in order to make that crystal clear in terms of, 23(1)AB, to ensure that we made it crystal clear that the authority may suspend or cancel any license issued, as opposed to what previously obtained, where it simply said that the authority may suspend or cancel any license it issued. And therefore, that correction will allow the Transport Authority to be able to issue, suspend, to revoke any license which is for the operation of a public service vehicle to be dealt with in the proper manner by the Transport Authority once this amendment has been passed. As I said, it's a very minor amendment. They've also made a definition of the term permit, which is defined as a permit which is issued pursuant to Section 23(1) to operate a motor vehicle as a PSV, motor omnibus, minibus, or road taxi. And Mr. Speaker, I think it is important, I didn't want to speak in the last debate because I knew that we were going to be introducing a minor amendment to this particular piece of legislation. But I think on the points that have been made in the earlier debate on the law reform and law revision amendment, this is also a good example of sometimes how legislation needs to be amended even after it has passed. I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that sometimes till you operationalize or are about to operationalize a piece of legislation, sometimes things may be missed. And while the edit in this case was really initially just a typographical error or a word that could have been omitted, the word it, the reality is that for further clarity and to avoid any misunderstanding or misinterpretation, CPC felt it necessary to allow us to do this quick amendment in order to be able to bring clarity and fullness to the legislation. I can also say, Mr. Speaker, that as we roll out in the next few weeks the public education campaign and start to finally grapple with the issues related to public service vehicles. I have been in discussions with the Honourable Attorney General, the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, and we've identified a number of areas across the country which have become problematic for not only the Transport Authority, but also for the Barbados Police Service as it relates to the operation of PSVs. River Road is one example, for instance. Warrens is another, where we constantly have the complaints of persons stopping, you know, in areas which have not been designated for picking up and dropping off passengers. People choose not to use the terminals that have been designated for their use, and we have been working with the AG's chambers to ensure that we can now have a number of cameras located in specific areas to help us to facilitate identifying where people are actually breaking the law, and certainly in an effort to bring order to a sector, a transportation sector, that certainly has created a lot of disorder in recent times, and we really want to be able to address a lot of the concerns of persons not stopping in the right places and not abiding by the rules, whether it is in terms of their attire, whether it is in terms of just general behavior as persons who are providing in a very important service to the general public. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I said at the outset, it is a very minor amendment. We will, in due course, allow for the regulations to be shared with the general public. They've been approved by Cabinet. That is the revised regulations. And we will now be, over the course of the next few weeks, be moving very aggressively to continue our discussions and the rollout with the PSV sector to bring some level of order to that sector over the coming months. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Mr. Speaker, it won't be long.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Mr. Speaker, it won't be long. I believe, sir, a word to the ways is sufficient. The amendment here, sir, the reason for the amendment is found at the beginning of a bill, and it explains. A bill entitled the Transport Authority Amendment Bill 2024, an act to amend the Transport Authority Act Cap 295A to make provision for the Transport Authority to cancel or suspend any license issued in respect of authorizing a person to drive or act as a conductor on a public service vehicle, motor omnibus, minibus, or route taxi. The ability to suspend any license issued in respect of authorizing a person to drive or act as a conductor, etc. A word to the wise is sufficient. Sir, I'm an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur. I like to see small business. I like to see people making a living for themselves. I believe in the hustle. I like to see people going for the dollar. What I cannot accept is a complete lack of consideration for everybody else in your pursuit of that dollar. So I had the misfortune a couple of weeks ago to be coming from Whole Town, going to town on Highway 1. There were about 30 cars in a slow procession, in a very slow procession, unable to pass because that road is narrow. There's one lane going south, one lane going north. If there's a steady flow of traffic coming, and this was going home time, this was 4:30 rush hour, so the traffic was heading out of town. So there's no good reason that there should not have been a free flow of traffic into town. In the morning, the traffic goes towards town with a backup. In the afternoon, it comes out of town. I would have expected, sir, to have made my steady way down that road. I was in a backup of traffic of about 30 vehicles, nobody able to pass. at the end of it, eventually, sir, when we got on to Black Rock, there was a ZR driving. He was driving slowly to enable persons to come onto the route and be available for pickup. And because of the flow of traffic in the other direction, nobody was able to pass. Sir, at not one point in that drive from Old Town to Black Rock did the odometer of my car get past 20 kilometers. It was a crawl. That is how accidents happen. People get impatient and take risks. It is a dangerous, selfish practice. I remember, sir, when we first started constructing laybys on the highway, because when I was a child, I had nothing named layby. Everything used to stop on the road, and you had to dodge around. The government started to construct laybys at bus stops. And initially, only the transport board buses were allowed to stop at the laybys. When the ZRs came and it was the little Suzuki carries at that point in time, sir, I'm dating myself, they were not allowed to stop there. And they petitioned for it. And they agitated for it. That they needed to be able to compete equally. They needed to be able to stop at a bus stop, at a designated bus stop, and to be able to use the laybys. They agitated for it. So I'm not painting everybody with the same brush. Let me start by saying that, because there are some who toe the line, but it has crept in to the vernacular of Barbadiana, the term ZR culture. If we say the ZR culture, everybody knows what it means. The fact that a phrase has been coined to represent something bad means you need to check yourself and find out what informed the creation of that phrase in the same way. But having fought for the right to use the laybys, sir, a lot do not. I don't want to say most, because then I can take flat for it. I don't want to say the vast majority, because I can take the flat for it. I am saying sufficient of a number do not use the laybys that cause traffic congestion in Barbados. Highway 1 is awful. Highway 7 on a morning, from Silver Sands all the way down, Maxwell, Top Rock, all the way down, sir, is a menace in the morning because people refuse to follow the law. It is a simple thing. I have been a driver for, I was 16 and 51. My mass is shaky, sir. That's like 35 years, I'm guessing. I've been a driver for over 35 years. In that time, I have been stopped once. Once. I came through the Central Bank, sir, and I cut across that road to go down by the ACAF, and the police pulled me over. And I come up front, I said, my man, I know I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong and late for court. Just give me the ticket. I know I'm wrong. In 35 years, I have been stopped once. I got a parking ticket once, and I promptly went. I ain't calling a favor and asked nobody for nothing. I picked myself up and went to District A Court, Magistrate's Court, and I paid the clerk of the court $50 and was done with that because I was wrong. How can it be, sir, that persons end up with 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, over 100 convictions and still operate a public service vehicle? There must be some natural disqualifier. There was a loophole, sir, because the Transport Authority was not the one granting the licenses, so they didn't have the power to revoke the licenses. I started by saying, I appreciate a poor man trying to make $1. But it can't be at the expense of everything. You cannot make everybody using Highway 7 on a morning late because you decide to be selfish. There's enough for everybody. You ain't just cutting the throats of the drivers who trying to get to work. You cutting the throats of the other ZR drivers who trying to make an honest living as well. Sir, and while I'm here, I wish to represent the people who put me here. The good people of Christchurch East, those who live in Ferry Valley, where the ZRs refuse to drive the full extent of the route. Those who live in Chancery Lane and Long Beach Estates and up that side, where the drivers refuse to drive the full extent of the route. I flagged down one, sir, recently, who was coming up out by Silver Sands. They saw a set of people at a bus stop. One person was on the van. They put the person out and turned around to go and pick up the 5 or 6 people at the bus stop. I don't care if you give back the money. You are to drive a route. What about the other people on that route waiting for you to come who are further up? The routes, you are licensed to drive a route. Ferry Valley is being underserved right now by the ZR to run the route up there. They do not go up there. A lot of times, sir, they put people off on the top of the road. I don't know if you know Pilgrim Road, sir. The gas station at the top of Pilgrim Road. You know how far it is to walk from Pilgrim Road to Ferry Valley? And for those who are listening, who might not know where Ferry Valley is, where people go and park the cars to watch the planes land, up in there. The Regional Police Training Center, Paragon, up in there. You know what it's like for an old person with 2 heavy bags of groceries to have to walk that whole distance because a ZR put them off? You know what it is later at night when the school children couldn't get a bus and get on the ZR and have to get off and walk that long, dark route by themselves? Sir, I'm not trying to stop anybody, but laws exist for a reason. When you don't follow, if you don't follow laws, sir, in a cinema, you get put out. No harm, no foul. If you don't follow the rules on a cricket field, you get put off. No harm, no foul. When you don't follow the rules of the road and the laws on the road, people die. Loss happens. Injury happens. Chaos happens. How many videos have we seen, sir, in a van stand with people fighting or chaos ensuing? How many videos have we seen where the conductors are doing bad on the road and behaving in a way that is not conducive to what they're supposed to be doing? How many videos do we see where the drivers of a ZR get out and behave themselves in the worst way? So I will tell you, and this is a true story, I'm not going to call the person's name. I once was so vexed. And I hope I don't get myself, I think there's privilege in here, sir, so I probably won't get charged for what I said. I was so vexed with a ZR driver who refused to let me pass, that when I got a chance to pass him out, I passed him out and then started to slow down. And I would not let him pass. This was down Highway 7 until we got by Top Rock. And the person overtook me, swung in front of me, and jumped out to confront me. And then he realized who it was. I wasn't an MP then. I was a lawyer. And he said, sorry, Mr. Abrahams. Got back in his car, in his van, and I drove off, and he drove off. But he was coming to confront me. He was coming to confront me for doing to him exactly what he was doing to everybody else. Sir, we see this as a small thing. We see this as a small... I have on my computer an article that I wrote, a letter to the newspaper. It's about 6 or 7 years ago. I was advised don't send it in. I was advised don't send it in because, you know what, politically you don't want to touch certain things. You don't appear to be targeting the small man. But every slack possible has been cut. Small men who obey the law deserve to get through. The hustlers who do what they have to do and don't offend or hurt anybody else deserve to get through. These ZR drivers who drive and conduct their business in such a way that school children are not put in danger, they deserve to get through. The road traffic regulations and the laws are not hard to follow. They are not hard to follow. Most people in the course of their driving life will not get 2 reports. Most people, they will not get 2. And it can be to say that because you play the road all the time, that you are at a higher risk. We've all heard the mitigation measures in the court, sir. It can be to say that because you drive the road the whole day, you can end up with more. Because 2 in 35 years can be 100 in a year or 100 in 2 years. If you cannot obey the rules set for you, you need to be doing something else. Go and do something else less dangerous. Go and do something else that doesn't hurt anybody. Go and do something else that doesn't put you in a position of conflict with the law. I believe that as opposed to cutting them slack, I believe that all the buses, taxi drivers, route taxi, anybody that carries a group of people for hire must be held to a higher standard. I am paying you to get me there safely. That's the contract. I give you my money, I get on, and I expect to reach where I'm going safely. That is all I ask. All I ask is that you obey the law. And for people who think I'm being unfair, just factor this. Every time that PSV goes off route to cut out a line of traffic, the insurance is very clear. The insurance document that they sign says that you are covered driving X to Y along this path. When they are off route, you are not covered by the insurance. If the vehicle gets in an accident off route, you are not covered by the insurance. I am saying this, sir, because I have to, my conscience makes me say, for everybody that doesn't know, I'm saying it because we need to do better. I value the PSVs. They provide an invaluable service to Barbados. The government can't provide all the transport. We can't do it. With all the government buses and all the TAP buses, we still need the PSVs. I am not saying get rid of them. I am not saying they're a waste. They are a valuable asset to our transport system. However, I'm saying all the irresponsible ones need to come out. They need to come out. And it is time now, sir, that the owners answer as well for their drivers. I get in your vehicle. You're the person responsible for hiring him. Why would you hire a man with 50 convictions, 50 traffic convictions, to put my child on the bus with him? The whole sector needs now, sir, to just heed the warning, because the warning is now here. This is being put in place that we can now effectively control and give the ultimate sanction on drivers and conductors who breach the law. I am not asking you to do anything out of the pale. I am simply saying, toe the line. The road is no place to have a good time. The road is no place to have fun. And please, for the people in Ferry Valley, for the people in Ealing Park and Chancery Lane, for the people in Long Beach Estates, if you have a license to drive a route, drive the whole route. You're providing a service to everybody from the beginning of the route to the end of the route. If you don't do that, then you're not just cheating the government, you're not just cheating your license, but you're cheating the public of Barbados. This is my plea to those in the public sector, in the PSV sector, and the transport sector generally. This is my plea. Let us now get this sector under control. You have it within your power to do it yourself. I am asking you, please do what is right by the people of Barbados. I thank you and I support the amendment, sir.
Honourable Leader Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me first of all to thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch East for his contribution. I think he speaks with a very similar passion as I feel most of the rest of us do in relation to behavior that we would not wish to see on our roads, especially for a service that is being provided to the general public. And I know we all want to stamp out the dangerous behaviors that have pervaded in our society for some time. I just want to quickly give some assurances to the Honourable Member and to wider Barbados as well and all those who are listening. The regulations have taken a lot of what the member for Christchurch East has alluded to. Again, within the regulations, persons must obviously not drive in any manner as to cause danger to passengers. It also covers the fact that for the purpose of picking up or setting down passengers, they have to stop the vehicle in a designated stopping place. And also they have to use a bus lay-by provided therefore, or where there's no bus lay-by, they draw the vehicle as close as possible to the left or near side of the road. In relation to the issue of the completing the routes, the regulations will provide that the drivers shall, after leaving the terminal with passengers, proceed directly to places included in the route of the vehicle, and also complete the route specified in the permit before returning to the terminal, and return to the terminal on the scheduled return journey. I won't go through all of the details, sir, because I have spoken to this on a previous occasion, but simply to say that a lot of the behaviors that we are concerned about have been captured in the regulations after extensive consultation with the sector and certainly with the general public weighing in as to some of their concerns. So I feel the pain of the Honourable Member for Christchurch East. I assure you that I too have had some levels of road rage at times when, as Minister, I have seen a lot of foolishness on the road. And I've had to remind myself that I need to leave things to the Barbados Police Service, for which they're perhaps better equipped to deal with. But I have had the cause sometimes to be concerned about the way in which persons stop, inappropriately, and also the way they drive. I travel the coast road quite a bit, so I can tell you it is of concern. But I am confident that now that we have the strengthening of this particular amendment and also the accompanying regulations, which not only focus on the responsibilities of drivers, it focuses on the responsibilities of conductors, the general public and the passengers who use these vehicles, but also imposes responsibilities on the owners of vehicles so that they too are brought within the ambit of responsibility. In other words, we all have a part to play in ensuring that public transportation is safe, and that it is, while we're trying to create economic activity on the one hand, that we're also ensuring that we do not create any major challenges or issues for persons who are using these vehicles. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methink the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methink the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, clauses 1 through 4.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 through 4 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 through 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not report the passing of one bill in committee to His Honour the Speaker.
The question is that I do now report the passing of one bill in committee to His Honour the Speaker. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now cited as the Transport Authority Amendment, be passed and cited as the Transport Authority Amendment Bill 2024. 2020.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, we revert to government notices. Ms. Bradshaw.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Financial Institutions Amendment Bill 2024.
First reading of bills recommitted.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Financial Institutions Amendment Bill 2024.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Government business recommitted. Order number 6, sir, on the supplementary ordering page. In the name of the Honourable Minister and the Ministry of Finance, to move the second reading of the Financial Institutions Amendment Bill 2024.
Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Speaker. I resisted the urge to speak on the law reform and revision bill, sir, because part of the work that this government has been undertaking over the last 5 years, sir, really has been the stuff of legend in relation to vacuum cleaners, sir. And to the extent that the review of all of our systems, all our legal work, sir, is important work. And to the extent that this specific bill that's here within that context, sir, I think is important, given that, as you would recall, sir, this chamber passed a new central bank bill, sir, in 2021, a new payments bill in 2021, sir. And as part of that process of reviewing the legislation and make sure that everything is okay, sir, and I must tell you the one thing I always say all the time, sir, the one thing that I did not count on as being part of this job was the amount of legislation that the Ministry of Finance generally engages with CPC to be able to get things done in this country. And therefore, I take this opportunity now to again thank the staff of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office, who from time to time have had to turn things around quickly given the nature of what happens. But I think equally, sir, the work that the Law Review Commission is also undertaking to ensure that all of the laws, sir, that we have in our books, which, as you know, sir, some of them were passed long before most, if not some of us in this Parliament were born, and the extent to which those laws were drafted, sir, at a time that was very different, sir. Systems were very different, attitudes were very different, a whole host of things were very different when those laws were passed, and therefore the mechanism through which this government is seeking to ensure that we modernize everything, sir, is important to make sure there's consistency. The first time I ever heard the word lacuna, sir, because I'm not practiced in law, is coming out of exchanges with CPC in relation to peculiarities, if you like, sir, that things may pop up from time to time, for which was not intended, but obviously corrective measures are taken from a legislative drafting perspective. And this bill, sir, is really kind of one of those areas as identified as part of the review. Because having done the central bank bill in 2020, and the payment system bill in 2021, a review of which granted the central bank specific powers to not just issue guidelines but directives on a range of issues as the entity that looks after the financial stability of the country. It is important that when we looked at the suite of laws for which the central bank administers or has the oversight for, the Financial Institutions Act presented a lacuna, as it is said, because on the one hand, where it can issue guidelines under and directives under the new Central Bank Act, as well as the National Payment Systems Bill Act, it could only issue guidelines under the Financial Institutions Act. And then as it relates, sir, with respect to the setting of fees and all of that, guidelines as opposed to directives is something that we are seeking to correct here, just to make sure that the suite of legislation, sir, is complete in relation to this matter. Now, the reality of it is, sir, that you would know, sir, recently one of the institutions indicated that they were going to introduce some fees, sir, and the bank intervened to ensure that that was put on pause. And to the extent, sir, that as we work through with the fact, and as I said earlier when I was speaking on the cybercrime bill, sir, financial institutions in this country, sir, spend an inordinate amount of money investing in this system, sir, bringing technology and all of that to be able to help Barbadians, sir, do their business better and easier. One of the areas that we would like the financial institutions to do more, sir, is within the space of lending, and to the extent that the risk appetite, sir, given not necessarily risk appetite from our perspective, but it is really the global view of the kind of risk that countries and our systems in Barbados, if not modernized and digitized, sir, fully, would give the impression to those on the outside that somehow or the other, our inability, sir, to report on our data systems and the like, sir, may lead some to conclude that there is risk inherent in, is riskier, sorry, to do business in Barbados or to do transactions in Barbados if we ourselves don't put the systems in place to ensure that we mitigate and to provide the right kind of information to minimize the perception of risk. Hence the reason, sir, why the digital ID, which was started by the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, then the member for St. Michael North, now the member for St. Michael South Central, and this government has invested so much time and effort, sir, to ensure that as we seek to put a system in place that satisfies the financial institutions, not just here in Barbados, but outside of Barbados, the parents to whom they report, sir, and where the perception of risk based on our lack of modernization and digitization so far, with a number of other systems, that once we can close that gap, sir, then it would mean that the opportunities for other types of lending in other areas, sir, that those risks now would be potentially deemed to be less risky, for lack of a better term, sir, especially given that, as you recall, sir, we passed the Fair Credit Reporting Bill in 2021, which is now being rolled out in the context of how liabilities and debts are tracked. Because as you know, sir, in the same way that Barbadians men have got their ID card, sir, in the numbers that the Honourable Member spoke to, in given the population, by the same token, Barbadians, sir, for the most part, pay their bills on time, they pay their debt, sir. There's always a few people, as you know, sir, that as we spoke then, that will not make eye contact with you, sir, when you go certain places. But in the main, sir, most Barbadians pay their debts on time. And I make that reference because the link between knowing your customer with respect to identity management, sir, being linked to the fact that as we modernize all of our systems to give the right kind of information for the perception of risk, sir, that as we do these things, the investment that financial institutions are making to modernize and digitize their systems, it means then, sir, that in the short to medium term, the kind of lending that we would love to see the financial institutions, particularly within the banking sector, do more of, I believe, sir, the fundamentals will be in place to facilitate such things happening, rather than relying only on fees to be able to make a profit, but the loan portfolio could be expanded such that the monies that we have within our system, we are able to have deployed in the best possible way. Notwithstanding the fact, sir, that we are working on a range of other opportunities to as we economists say, sir, mop up some of the liquidity in the system to put to good use. The reality is, part and parcel of any economy, sir, is the financial system lending to all sectors, understanding the risk associated with lending in those sectors, not because of a gut feeling, sir, but because you've put the systems in place to be able to properly track and monitor and know who is good credit, sir, who is not so good, who's truly risky, sir, and therefore on that basis then you would then determine the risk profile and obviously the rates at which you'll be able to do that. So this bill is here before the chamber, sir, given a set that context, is to ensure that as far as it relates to the administration of the Financial Institutions Act, that there's no conflict or anything in relation to what is already set out in the National Payments System Bill, as well as the new Central Bank Act there, that gives the very specific clarity in relation to how fees are to be introduced. And to the extent that, as it speaks here to financial statements in subsection 43 of the main bill, sir, it speaks to the type of the reports that are required to be submitted every quarter in relation to all licensees in relation to registered under the Financial Institutions Act in relation to being able to do that. But specifically, sir, as it relates to fees and charges, it now speaks to the fact that any entity who is proposing to impose a fee or charge that is unreasonable, then the bank shall require the licensee to disclose the basis for the fee or the charge. Now, sir, I again make the point. When it comes to cybersecurity, the protection of our systems, we gave a mandate for all of the commercial banks in the country, as well as the two largest credit unions, which are known as systemically important institutions, SIFIs, that they will be required to bring their systems into the 21st century. Because as we are putting all of this architecture in place, sir, to modernize and digitize and all of that, it means that the very protection, so when I spoke to earlier about somebody using my credit card, shopping, and having those systems in place to track and monitor and to alert, whether by phone or even by mobile, as the case may be, these are the types of things and the protections that money is spent on to ensure that the integrity of everybody's money in this country can be protected. Now, does that mean that they're not susceptible to hacking? Absolutely not. But they've spent a lot of money upgrading the systems to allow Barbadians to do their business easier. Now, as we do our business easier, sir, the more transactions and we're seeing the data flow through, the more transactions taking place digitally, it benefits everybody, because it means then that not just the volume of transactions, but the speed at which we can access goods and services now, sir, in the 21st century is important. But having said that, there's some rules now in relation to how the setting of these fees can be done, so that there's a process through which you can't just wake up tomorrow and hear that your fee going up to XYZ. That there's a process in place to be able to ensure that this is done. Now, under previous iterations, sir, we had indicated to all the financial institutions that there must be some account where there are no fees associated with those accounts, and that, sir, is important to appreciate, because every man jack in this country, sir, as we would say, in being able to, one, get and verify, well, the digital ID, to be able to verify their identity, having access, because the intent of that project was multifaceted, but one of the genuine objectives of it was to ensure that any person who possesses a digital ID, sir, should be able to walk into any bank or credit union with that ID, and that entity, sir, will be assured that this is the person, and therefore from an onboarding perspective, you get better access to banking services, sir. Precisely because of the issues that we were facing, as you would recall, sir, we had to deal with a range of issues to deal with the OECD, the anti-money laundering issues, sir, range of things that we had to resolve, because the things that we were accustomed to doing in the past, sir, the standards changed, and we did not change fast enough, such that when people came to Barbados to review what we were doing, we were found wanting given the setting of the global standards. And as you would recall, sir, from between Basel II and Basel III, and all of the international banking regulations that were set, we were found wanting in some instances. Notwithstanding the fact, sir, that there's still some parts of the United States where the standards are not as stringent as we have set ourselves, and certainly as the international regulations require, it is important for the public to appreciate that because we're a small jurisdiction, we really got to dot our I's and cross our T's, because the reputational damage that could be done to a country like Barbados and the extent to which any correspondent banking or relationships could be compromised, it is important that we set the appropriate frame. So the specific amendment here, sir, really speaks to the notice being given to the central bank of its intention 60 days before the proposed date to vary the fee or charge, sir, and that the central bank, where the central bank receives written notice in accordance with subsection 2, it shall, within 30 days of receiving the notice, inform the licensee in writing whether or not it objects to the fee or charge to be imposed or varied, and shall issue a directive to the licensee stating any action that the licensee is required to take, if any, in relation to the proposed fees. So this is given legislative teeth, sir, under the Financial Institutions Act, notwithstanding, sir, what is already in the new Central Bank Act and what is already in the National Payments Systems Act, sir, to ensure that that lacuna, sir, that wasn't there, that was there, that is corrected in relation to how we get things done. Now, the truth is, sir, the power to issue guidelines and directives, all central banks globally, sir, in the interest of ensuring that there's financial stability in the system, sir. And this is not meant to come across, because, you know, some people say that we're trying to stop people from saying this, we're trying to stop people from doing that, and all of these things, sir. This specific bill here, in the same way that the cybersecurity bill was intended to protect people, sir, this bill here is intended to protect ordinary citizens from arbitrary decisions being taken around fees, and that there's a process in place that allows the government operating through, in this instance, sir, the Central Bank of Barbados, to be able to monitor what is happening in relation to these things. But the power, sir, to issue directives and guidelines is an evolving, is an evolving practice amongst regulators globally, because if and when institutions, as some may do, find themselves, sir, in trouble from time to time, the regulators must have the capacity to be able to resolve it. And this is something that is particularly important. I will take the opportunity here, sir, just to mention in passing why this is important, because as you may recall, sir, we have the Barbados Deposit Insurance Corporation, sir, which was set up to be able to insure persons' bank accounts up to $25,000. So that is what is insured in the system. And in a couple of weeks' time, sir, there will be a training exercise simulation, call it that, sir, where the institutions now will be, I don't want to say practicing, because we don't ever want to be able to use those mechanisms. But if a financial institution fails, sir, the processes that must be followed, sir, clearly have to be well thought out, orderly, such that in the event that happens, whether it's communication, sir, with the deposit holders and all of that, sir, that is something that's going to be undertaken in a couple of weeks' time, as part of how we are, as regulators, and certainly as government, and potentially affected institutions, sir, that these things are part and parcel of how we engage in managing risk across the financial sector. So there's nothing to be alarmed about, sir, in relation to that, because this is something that happens globally, and to the extent, sir, that regulators must have the capacity to, and as in the context of cyber and all of that, sir, where they have already issued guidelines for the banks and the financial institutions who are systemically important, sir, that they must follow the guidelines in order to ensure that they meet very minimum cybersecurity standards. And this is something, we saw it last year, sir, where one of the credit unions experienced an event, and regrettably it left them out of operation for a few weeks in relation to some of their core systems, and therefore the protection of the system is important, and I hope that MIST and the appropriate authorities will be able to clearly identify who those perpetrators were at some point and be able to bring them to account, given we just passed the cybersecurity bill, because it is things like that, sir, that will, I believe, will give the public greater confidence that what this government is doing is bearing fruit. And therefore, these are things that genuinely, sir, impact people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, it is important that regulators are able to issue guidelines and directives as appropriate, whether it is something of a technical nature from a cybersecurity perspective, whether it's something from a policy perspective, whether it's something from a regulatory perspective in relation to capital adequacy, the risk management framework, sir. All of these things routinely regulators globally meet, and as institutions get bigger and engage in more sophisticated activities, sir, it means that there are certain compliance issues that have to be met. Internal controls have to be expanded or tightened depending on the particular type of risk, in order to ensure then that at the end of the day, there's never a mismatch between the assets and the liabilities of the institution, such that these things can happen smoothly. But these issues, sir, are evolving issues, and therefore it is something that, as we continue to monitor the uptake in relation to the use of these technologies by Barbadians, it is important that we understand that yes, it costs money to be able to do that, but the way that we want it to be able to be financed and paid for is really through the adoption of these technologies quickly, the adoption of the use of the full use, I would say, of the digital ID and any other identity management tool that facilitates, sir, the exchange of accurate information between you and whoever is going to lend to you, or whatever activity that you're engaged in, such that either the on-lending or the redeployment of those resources then would mean that there's sufficient growth coming into the economy through those loans, such that the institutions themselves then are making money from what they were set up to do, lend people money. And if you're lending people money and you're earning from lending people money, then there's less reliance, sir, in relation to fee structure. So we ourselves, as Barbadians, sir, individually and collectively, how quickly we adopt these digital solutions, the identity management, sir, allowing us to have the full extent of a robust fair credit reporting system, given that most Bajans, sir, pay their bills on time. If you don't pay your bills on time, well then, sir, you got to get your house in order. But if you're paying your bills on time, you're paying your loans on time, then you should actually benefit, sir, from less interest than, because you got to weed out the good apples, sir, the bad apples, so to speak. And therefore, the extent to which the fair credit reporting structure is intended to work is that if you are a good credit, sir, it means you get a good interest rate. If I'm a bad credit, it means that my interest rate is a little different, sir. A few basis points more on the basis of what it is that I want to do, sir. And therefore, it is that kind of data management, sir, data analytics, that the adoption of these technologies will help usher in, and therefore allowing Bajans then to be able to have access to greater credit. These were issues that we identified before, such that in theory, sir, the more money that you're lending and coming back into the institution, then you rely less on a fee structure to be able to drive profit, but you're actually generating investment into the economy through loans, through credit, and therefore you're able to run the institution in a much more substantive way. And so, sir, that is the thrust of the amendments before the chamber. And I say to Barbadians that as this government continues to look after your interests, we are not here to stop anybody from doing things that they don't want to do, but just appreciate that when you do something, sir, there are consequences. And so, sir, with those very few words, I will beg to move, sir, that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, sir. I have just a few words to add to these amendments, to this debate concerning these amendments. I hesitated whether I should stand because I felt as if the member for Christchurch East Central, as we sit next to each other, may have gotten a little bit turned around in the subjects that each of us addresses, because he certainly spoke more about the digital ID and digital payments than I expected. And so I'll take the cue, and I will perhaps say a few words on a different side. There's that flexibility in this Barbados of a party government, sir. So I believe that most Barbadians, if not all Barbadians, and we saw it with the discussion that took place about the issue of fees in the banking system, and the extent to which Barbadians largely feel that there must be greater regulation brought to bear. And these matters must be administered in less of an ad hoc way by the private commercial banking center. And certainly, we must applaud the steps taken by the Central Bank of Barbados to be able to bring some predictability to this question of fees. These amendments seek to allow the central bank to exercise discretion to require a financial institution that they supervise to disclose the basis for imposing a fee or a charge. It also addresses the period of notice within which a bank or other financial institution informs the central bank of the imposition of a fee or a charge, allowing the central bank to issue directives with respect to those fees and charges that Barbadians sometimes overnight wake up and you see in your inbox all of a sudden that you are now being charged more and more fees. I recall the time, sir, that my mother had an account at a particular institution that really was just drawing fees. That institution was really just drawing fees from the few dollars that remained there. And so essentially, it turned out that I am paying you for the privilege of holding and reinvesting my money. And the Barbadians who are most affected by these unreported, unregulated changes in fee structure are those who can least afford to pay for these changes. Barbadians who, sir, one of the reasons that this government focuses so much on providing more choice for Barbadians to invest is that when you have few resources, your investment decisions matter even more because the few dollars that you have to work for you. If you are able to eke out a little bit to save or to invest, the return has to be worthwhile. And so to put money on a bank and to just watch it dwindle away in fees and charges really does not serve the population. And these amendments help to bring some regularity and some predictability. A banking institution, a financial institution cannot just decide overnight, and certainly cannot do so without reference to the Central Bank of Barbados, which regulates it. The honourable member who led talked about the fact that all of these issues hang together. They hang together within the context of modernization of the way that we do business in the financial sector, but overall modernization of the economy. One of the things that young Barbadians are calling for more and more is the capacity to engage in commerce online, to be able to earn on those online platforms, to be able to use their intellectual property to create a product and to then earn from advertising dollars or from other mechanisms that they can use in a global marketplace. This government has to meet the challenge, to remove whatever barriers exist to allow young people to do that. And so the landscape of the economy, the global economy, is changing. It looks different. And whether it is pieces of legislation such as this, whether it is payment systems, whether it is digital ID to allow verifiable proof of address more easily, these things all hang together as part of a new economic landscape. The new economic landscape also is beginning to take on different dimensions. Sir, I saw some reaction to the report of the Governor of the Central Bank, the Economic Review of Barbados' Economy for 2023. And some of the commentary, some of the observations that I saw really gave me pause, because it suggests to me that this new dynamic economic environment with which we have to wrestle is not understood by some of the experts who present themselves as experts in this space. I give an example. All over the world, the retail sector is changing. Brick-and-mortar stores are realizing that they're not seeing the traffic. They're not seeing the sales, because where are people shopping? People are shopping online. Bajans more and more are shopping online. And even if they're not shopping online, they are aligning their shopping preferences and their consumer choices less to the old-fashioned things that we used to do, like go and buy material, and more to the newer things that young people tend to do, which is off-the-rack shopping. Most of the off-the-rack shopping, if it is not happening in some of the newer stores where the trends are matching what young people are wearing in other countries, then it's happening online. So the fact that Barbadians may not be going to your store to buy fabric surely cannot be a test of whether an economy is thriving. Surely cannot be used to debunk the claims of the Central Bank of Barbados that there's 4.4% growth in the economy. I challenge that individual to reset his metrics and to realize that perhaps you have a different problem of relevance to the consumers in this country. I would encourage the individual, as he is inviting the Central Bank Governor to do, to apply metrics that are relevant for the ground, what people are doing, how people want to spend their money in this country. I do not disagree with the notion, as a development economist, I say all the time, that mere numbers on growth do not tell the whole story. They tell a part of the story, but they don't tell the whole story. And so what must we look at? We must look at more newer and more dynamic measures of employment, because the traditional measures of employment and unemployment tell us something, but they don't tell us everything. We must look at different kinds of consumer patterns. Where actually is the spending taking place? Because just because it is not taking place by you does not mean that it is not taking place. And we have to be able to capture that activity in more modernized and more updated gross domestic product numbers and other measures. I believe that the work that the member for St. Michael's South and his team are doing to get what we call more high-frequency data on living conditions. How are people living? The Honourable Member for St. Michael's South and his team will soon embark on a country poverty assessment, a survey of living conditions, a household budget survey. These are the numbers that add to the data presented by the central bank to give us a full picture of the economy. But you cannot take a single metric of how many people pass through your store in a context where you have not changed your business model for 40 years to suggest that the report of the Central Bank of Barbados is not factual or not correct. So yes, add more metrics, but I dare say, sir, that the metrics that this particular commentator is trying to use are not the correct ones. Similarly, I also believe that the other commentator, who perhaps has more familiarity with the metrics on the ground in Antigua, where he may be stationed, than he does with the metrics on the ground in Barbados, may want to also revisit some of his assessment. And I do these things, sir, not to suggest that commentators do not have a place to come and respond. Sir, when I was in another dispensation, I couldn't wait for the central bank report. I know the member for Christchurch East Central felt the same way, because this was something that you got your teeth into and you looked at and you considered critically, but you have to consider it with the right perspective and information. And so the claim by the expert from the University of the West Indies who made his comments in the press yesterday, that what we are looking for is austerity. What we are looking for is growth that follows austerity. Sir, most of us who do any work in this field understand that growth and austerity cannot coexist. By its definition, any measures that are seeking to dampen consumption, any measures that are reducing government expenditure, cannot lead to growth. Ordinarily do not lead to growth. And that is why the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, sir, has a 1 and a 2. And the 1 was about fiscal rectitude and responsibility. And I'll tell you, sir, that development economists like me don't much like austerity. Development economists like me have not in the past much liked the IMF. But why is Barbados such an interesting case study to all of the world today? Barbados is an interesting case study because even in the context of an IMF program, the government of Barbados reduced expenditure in non-essential areas where it could most afford to reduce expenditure, and increase expenditure, social expenditure that would make a difference in people's lives. I dare say, sir, that the government of Barbados in its BERT 1 program helped to contribute to a brand new IMF. Because I don't think that the team that came to Barbados ever imagined that a country the size of ours would say to them, oh, no. We increasing pensions. Oh, no, no, no. I know you hear about austerity, but we're increasing welfare contributions. I know you hear about austerity. I know you're here to cut social spending, or at least that is what the fund of old used to look at. But we are returning free university education to the people of Barbados. That is what Bert 1 was about. So even though it was about reducing and establishing some fiscal responsibility, it was also about making sure that we made the right socioeconomic choices for people. That was about the austerity that is referenced here. And why did we make Bert 2 about growth and the restructuring of government? Because we knew that the two could not coexist. We knew that we would have to make some critical investments in modernizing our systems to lead to growth and further investment. So to suggest that the improvements in public finances came from austerity and not increased prosperity is not to approach the matter with a clear understanding of economic issues. Sir, I am one who believes that there's no doubt that there are other tests to be applied. I agree that the growth number is not the only test, but the growth number is not the only metric that is referenced in the central bank report. And I think that we have to step back and be able to appreciate that there was a time, and there were past administrations, not ours, where it was only a very narrow view of what mattered that was applied. We are making sure that we keep our eyes on all of the things and all of the movements that matter to people. That is why there is monitoring of the prices in supermarkets, not just formally in what we call the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, or the rate of inflation that is measured by the Barbados Statistical Service. We don't just look at that. But there's monitoring of the prices in the supermarkets, and there's a commitment to create a tool that allows Barbadians to track those prices. Why? Because those are the things that matter to people. This is not a government that is only tracking growth. This is not a country that is only tracking growth. A country that is only tracking growth or only cares about a growth number and not how it relates to people would not be making sure that the prices of the things that matter to people in the supermarket remain within a livable range, would not have agreed as part of the social partnership a compact with people to get the private sector to agree to keep certain prices steady. Where in the world have we heard of a partnership that does that? And so, sir, I say, bring your analysis, but let it be the right kind, because when it is not, we, sir, as a government that is responsible and have to make sure that people understand the truth, will come back to show you where it is not. Sir, with those words, I commend this bill to this House, and I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member, Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As usual, sir, the honourable member for St. Michael South Central has hit it out of the park, and I must say that these matters, sir, are serious matters, and I try not to give fuel to a lot of these things, because I don't know who is complaining about growth, sir. And I know that for a number of years there was none. And therefore, when you start getting into that kind of thing, I know that obviously we are doing what we are doing as we said that we would do. And the member could not have laid it out any clearer for Barbadians to appreciate. We spent the first few years stabilizing and make sure that we created the conditions for growth. The fact that the other side, sir, took 10 years and couldn't find it, that's their business, sir. The point is, in spite of the pandemic, in spite of the Asher, in spite of the hurricane, and everything that was thrown at us, the cost of living, the global supply chain issues, all of these things, sir, we faced and we were able to come up with the right kind of interventions that allowed us to be in a position, sir, where I don't want any Barbadian, sir, to take any of it for granted, because it has been 5 years, sir, of hard work, creating the right kind of policies to be able to give certain relative certainty, sir, with respect to those things. And by the same token, as we are debating this bill, sir, I urge them to continue along the path that this government has set, because as the honourable member indicated, it is not just about the number, sir. We want every Barbadian to feel as if they are part of this transformation. And that is why we have spent an inordinate amount of time, and I mentioned it earlier, sir, that the honourable member for St. Philip West, with the introduction of those digital jobs and the training for those digital jobs, sir, in the context of what we discussed about cybersecurity and all of these things, sir, there's a job for Bajans, not just to provide cybersecurity for countries outside, but they can also provide cybersecurity, sir, for companies and the government right here in Barbados. And therefore, because the last administration did not create or envisage of such opportunities for our people, sir, I say to Barbadians, let us ensure that we take advantage of those opportunities, sir, because at the end of the day, I know that once we get financial institutions, sir, lending to what perhaps were once perceived to be risky ventures, cultural activities, sir, small business activities, digital service businesses, sir, to be able to invest, because this is a global, sir, industry that and I spoke last week, sir, in relation to the African Exim bill, once we get the financing in place, sir, and the right management, then I am confident, sir, that we are able to not just rely less on fees and stuff from financial institutions, but they will see the benefits, sir, of being able to grow these businesses, make these investments through loans, sir, and say to Barbadians that they have to make sure that when they borrow monies from institutions, sir, that they spend them wisely and that they're productive, that will be able to come back and deliver and generate wealth intergenerationally, so that we can be assured of a society that is sufficiently stable. So I'm not going to spend much time going over those things, sir. There will be another time that we will deal with the politics and all that, but the reality is, sir, that all of these things together, all of these things, point to how this government, in viewing consumer protection, in looking at how we can ensure that people are not necessarily taken advantage of, but there is clarity with respect to what it is you're paying for, and I think the extent to which we now must ensure that the continued aggressive effort to drag, if necessary, sir, some segments of society along the path, but I think the majority of people get it, sir, that once we can unlock those opportunities, then we should be able to have not just, and I think, sir, we have a well-run financial system in this country, notwithstanding the Clico debacle and what the last government committed the country to in relation to that. But that aside, sir, we have a well-run financial system, and I hope, sir, that we can continue to see the financial system not just generate wealth, but be able to ensure then that that wealth is transferred securely, sir, from one generation to the next, and that the financial literacy that the honourable member for St. James South in her previous iteration with that program will be successful, sir, allowing us to be able to leverage the full impact of the investment climate that we're creating, and that Barbadians will see themselves as part of it. And so, sir, with those few words, I'd like to move, sir, that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, clauses 1 through 5.
Chair, I beg to move that clause 1 through 5 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 through 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chair, I beg to move that you do not report His Honour the Speaker to pass in the one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committee is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Financial Institutions Amendment Act 2024.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Tuesday, the 13th at 10 a.m.
Question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 13th day of February 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 13th day of February 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.